darkness, set free from who we were, changed and changing still to be made in your image.
Hi everyone, good to have you here at Radical. I hope that you guys are excited to keep going in our series where we study about the life of the prophet Elisha. We've had a couple of stories, exciting, interesting, maybe a little bit unfamiliar. And so we're going to continue talking about a few stories related to the life of this incredible prophet from the Old Testament. And so we're going to be looking at 2 Kings tonight again. But before we do that, I've got an opener question for you guys. So, how do you typically respond when you hit adversity in your life? Go ahead and talk about that with your small group. Thanks for sharing your answers to that. And we're going to read a story here from the prophet Elisha's life where there's some adversity that hits not only him, but this family in a big way. And it's interesting to see how they respond and how Elisha responds in the midst of that circumstance. So we're going to go ahead and dive into a few things about that after we read our scripture. But just like last week, I'm going to have you guys read it together rather than reading it here and then having you guys just watch and listen. I want you guys to read it together. So go ahead and look up 2 Kings chapter 4 and then read verses 15 to 37 together as a group. So go ahead and pause it, read as a group, and then when you're finished, you can unpause and continue the video. So we're going to look at a few things from this story that we can learn and apply to our own lives here today, and when we look at how we can live like Elisha. So the first thing is that we can lean on others for help. And really, when you look at this, despite God answering this couple's prayers for a son, Elisha tells them about this, right? He says, well, you can expect to have a son born. And they're like, oh, don't even tell us that. Don't get our hopes up. And then sure enough, they have a son. And so they're thrilled. They're so happy. But then you kind of see the situation play out that every mother, every parent worries about, which is losing their child, where their son complains his head's hurting, and they bring him in, and then he dies. And this is what the mother is like, man, this is what I was worried about. And so what does she do? This mother who's experienced this deep loss, she's grieving, she's hurting. The thing she does is she talks to her husband, and then she sets out after Elisha, right? She is going to go look for him for help. They call him the man of God, but they're talking about Elisha, the prophet. And so I wonder, when have you needed to lean on others for support in your life? Share a story or a time when you've needed to lean on others. Go ahead and talk about that with your group. So she finally gets to Elisha, and after he sends out Gehazi to meet her, she is able to finally get to him. She tells Gehazi everything's fine, but then she gets to Elisha and she falls at his feet. He can tell something's wrong, and she finally tells him what's going on. And then Elisha gives these instructions to Gehazi to get ready, take his staff, and go, and to just go and lay the staff on the child's face. But then she says, no, I'm not leaving. I'm not going anywhere without you. She's not going to go home unless Elisha goes with her. But you can tell as she's going through this, she's looking for somebody. I'm sure her husband is there and supporting her, but Elisha was there from the start. He's the one that told this couple that they were going to have this child, and she's looking for him in the midst of this. She needs support. She needs help. And so she goes to Elisha, and Elisha responds. And so what we can learn from this is that when we're facing those difficult circumstances, it's okay to look for help. We can reach out to others. You don't want to ever wrestle with something alone. I know sometimes we feel that if we're going through something hard, we don't want to bother other people with it. We don't want to, put that burden on people. But that's what they're there for. And people care about you no matter who you are, no matter how much you might be feeling like people care about you or not. You have people that love you, that care about you. So if you're struggling with something, reach out and talk to somebody. Lean on someone because they're there for you. And God can use them to encourage and support you in the midst of that. So Elisha goes back with her, and she has some more support as she's going through this, and we'll see what God can do, right? And so kind of an example of this, when you think about, someone supporting you when circumstances get too tough, I think of the Lord of the Rings, when you've got Frodo, who's been carrying this burden of the ring for so long. They're finally there at Mount doom trying to destroy it, and he literally can't go anymore. He can't carry it any further, but he has to be the one carrying it. And so Samwise, that iconic line when he says, "I can't carry it, but I can carry you," and he just picks up Frodo and keeps carrying him the rest of the way. Sometimes we need to lean on people like Frodo needed to lean on Samwise, that even when we can't go any further, someone else can help us get through it. So don't be afraid to lean on others for help. The second thing I want to bring up to talk about from this story is that we need to pray first, act second. I wonder, how long does it take for you to pray about your problems? Is it something you do right away, or do you sometimes wait until things have gotten really bad or really out of hand before you go to God in prayer? Share a story about that with your group. I appreciate you sharing that, and just have some grace for yourself. Even if you're not the type of person who always takes it right to God, there's room for growth. You can continue to look to God quicker and lean on Him more fully. And when we look at Elisha's example here, right, he's facing this circumstance full of grief and loss. I'm sure he is incredibly pained by this child's death as well, just knowing the role that he had in this, where he was the one who told this couple that they would be having a child, and the joy that that brought them. He's feeling pain in this moment too, and he's probably a bit uncertain of what to do also. So you see what he does, right? He goes into the room alone, he shuts the door, and he prays to the Lord. That's powerful. It's one of those lines that you could kind of read on past, like, oh yeah, he goes in there, he prays, and then he does something else, right? And then you see the miracle that happens. It's easy to miss the fact that the first thing he does is goes in the room, makes sure he's alone in there, shuts the door, and then prays. That is something we can really learn from. And I remember there's an experience I had where I was facing a big decision. I was trying to decide on my college major. I'd been wrestling with, well, do I do youth ministry? Do I do something else? Graphic design, be a teacher, athletic training. There's a few things I was thinking about doing. And I just felt this really strong pull to step out and to do youth ministry. And so what I ended up doing was I was just so overwhelmed and burdened by this choice. And I was running out of time. I needed to declare a major. I needed to look and start setting my schedule for the next several years of college. And so I was so overwhelmed by it. I could have just made the decision and rolled with it and just owned it and not looked to God for it. But I went ahead and I went and prayed. And I had a couple friends come and pray with me. And in the midst of that prayer, I felt very clearly that God was wanting me to pursue youth ministry over the other decisions. And so I just took that step in faith to follow that because of His leading in my life. And so that's just a quick example from my life of how it turned out really great for me to stop and pray first and act second. And that's what Elisha does here. Before acting, he looks to God. He seeks out God's wisdom and strength for this moment because he knows the importance of looking to Him for that rather than just trying to come up with his own solution. He knows that he's having a hard time with this and he's not sure where to go. So he looks to God through prayer before he does anything in this situation. And the last thing we're going to talk about with this story is that we need to have the faith to try again. This is such a profound point of this story. You don't see this a lot in Scripture where the Bible characters have to keep trying in order for God to do a miracle. Oftentimes it kind of happens right away, it seems like. But this one, he tries to do the same miracle a couple times before it actually works. And it's pretty powerful to look at it. And so there's 3 attempts that he has to bring the boy back to life. The first, he sends Gehazi ahead to lay the staff on his face. That doesn't work. The boy's still dead when the mother and Elisha get there. And then Elisha, after praying, lays on the boy and he puts his mouth to his mouth and his hands to his hands and lays there outstretched. And he feels him start to warm up. So he stands up and walks around. I'm sure he's praying. And then he tries one more time. His third try is when he does the same thing. He lies on him outstretched, and then that's when the boy comes back to life. So it took a couple tries for this miracle to work where this boy is resurrected through Elisha. God's able to do this miracle through him. So I think oftentimes we want God to respond quickly and clearly to our prayers, right? Just like how we can use Google to look up anything, find an answer like that. But that's how we want God to be. We're like, God, can't you just do this? I'm going to pray this in faith, and I want you to do it now, right? And if he doesn't, we get really frustrated or we start to doubt. And this is an example where Elisha stays steadfast and he stays true in his faith, knowing that God can do it. And so I wonder, why do you think that God doesn't always respond immediately? He can, but why do you think sometimes he waits, or his response to our prayer is not yet? Go ahead and talk about that as a group. So it's really neat how Elisha has the faith to continue seeking after God and continue to try to make this miracle happen, to look to God for his wisdom and for him to do something miraculous and bring this boy back to life, even though he doesn't get the immediate results. Can you imagine if he would have just stopped after sending Gehazi ahead with the staff and realizing that didn't work, to just be like, well, there's no bringing this boy back, right? He continues to have the faith to know that God can do the miraculous, to keep seeking him and to look to him in prayer and to keep trying, and eventually the boy is raised to life. So I hope that you guys really enjoyed learning from this story, this incredible and kind of goofy story here with the prophet Elisha, but this example of resurrection and how he continued to look to God in spite of some obstacles in the way, in spite of being in a really challenging circumstance. He kept trying. He had the faith to continue to trust in God. And so I hope that you guys gained some lessons from this and that you're excited to continue to learn about Elisha in the few weeks ahead as we finish up this series. Thanks, guys. Now it's time for you to go and do your small group discussion.
Changed and changing still, to be made in your image.